All right, Colts Nation, what is going on? Let's just address the elephant in the room right off the bat. I am not, for those of you who are watching this and not listening to the audio version, I am not in the bedroom studio. Well, hold on. Is the elephant in the room the fact that I'm not in the bedroom studio, or the fact that this guy is right here behind me, a colored frog with glasses, staring directly into the camera, right? I mean, how about that for a backdrop, right? Regardless of the fact, you're with me right now in my Airbnb, recording on an iPhone to bring you an episode. I'm in Indianapolis for training camp for the second straight year to make sure I could give you guys the insights, the truth, the way I see it, right? That's all this channel is. It's the truth about the Colts, the way I see it. If you ever need to know what it is that you're watching, that's exactly what it is. Now, by the time you watch this video or listen to this episode, it's likely that Saturday's practice will have already been concluded, unless you're super early, in which case I'm grateful. If you're super late to the party, it's likely that perhaps even Sunday evening's practice had already concluded. But either way, I just wanted to make sure I touch base with you guys before I go into training camp and experience this once more. And training camp last year for me, had a little Jimmy John's before, by the way. We don't have Jimmy John's over in New York by me. We have Subway. And if I'm going to tell you right now, as a guy who loves a good sandwich, number one, if you want a great sandwich, you probably don't go to either of those places. Not really the point. But if we're talking Subway versus Jimmy John's, woof. I mean, Jimmy John's was pretty fucking good. Let's be 100% honest here. Good for you guys having Jimmy John's all over the place over here. I mean, that is unbelievable, but that's neither here nor there, right? Training camp last year was a very, very fruitful experience for me. Now, I do want to give you a little bit of something just to keep in mind as we go into training camp, because we're going to start seeing videos of guys making plays, all this type of stuff and all this hype, right? The way guys perform in training camp, not that there's nothing to take from it, but it's not the be-all, end-all. For example, last year, Darrell Baker Jr. was the guy at corner for us going into training camp, and he did very much look the part. We all know how that played out, right? You can have a good training camp and have a bad season. You can have a bad training camp and have a good season. All of this stuff is true. Not to say that it means nothing the way these guys play, but in terms of insights, in terms of true things that you can take away from training camp, what's much more important is who's playing with the ones, who's playing with the twos. From a play calling perspective, what are they trying to do? Who are they trying to get involved in the offense? All of these types of things. This is the stuff that has lasting power into the season, because they're trying to install an offense, they're trying to install a defense. Meaning whatever it is that they're trying to do and whatever players that they're spotlighting within that system, you can very much expect that that is going to stay consistent through the season, or at least through the start of the season, and then they'll see if things work or they don't work, right? So that's the more insightful stuff going into it. So the goal of this episode really is just to kind of give my final thoughts and questions and all that type of stuff going into training camp. We also had this huge wave of media availability on Thursday, right? And Chris Ballard spoke. Always nice to hear him talk, right? But he did give a little information about injuries and things of that nature that I couldn't help but be a little bit upset by. I know I just split you guys right down the middle, because some of you guys love when I'm positive about Chris Ballard, and some of you guys love when I'm negative about Chris Ballard, or rather hate when I'm positive about Chris Ballard, because realistically, I'm never negative about Chris Ballard. But if you've ever wanted me to be negative about Chris Ballard, you might be here today in one of the only times that has ever happened in the history of this show. So we're going to hear about that today. Yeah, so basically whatever I didn't cover going into training camp, that's what we're going to try to cover in this episode right here. Before we get into it, I have to hold on. Before I introduce myself, actually, and I will introduce myself, and you can skip past all this stuff, by the way. We're time-stamped over here. You guys have watched the videos before. Everything is time-stamped. Well, actually, is this one going to be time-stamped? I'll try to timestamp it. It might not be as precise because I don't have like the iMovie editor and all that stuff. I'm just going to upload this thing to YouTube and let it happen, right? Here's the story, okay? And I want you, is there something here, right? I go into JFK Airport to fly over here to Indianapolis. My plane takes off from Terminal 33, or rather Terminal 8, from Gate 33, okay? I then go to get my rental car from the airport when I get into Indianapolis, parked in spot number 33. I then go to take that rental car to drive to my Airbnb, which is where you are with me right now. What exit did I have to get off of? 33, okay? Isn't that a little bit bizarre, right? Should I be yelling Dallas Flowers' name tomorrow and talking about that, who, by the way, much like me, tore his Achilles last year? Just another little bit of things to tie that. I mean, that's really irrelevant. I just want some sympathy, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, let me introduce myself. My name is Justin. This right here is the Right on the Bench Colts podcast. As always, ask anyone watching the video and enjoying, go ahead, shoot it a like. Gonna help me get out to as many Colts fans as humanly possible. If you're listening to the audio version, leave a 5-star review if you're enjoying it. Let the people know how much you like the show. Bonus points to you if you understand that reference. If you're not enjoying the show, don't be like a middle-aged white woman on Yelp, okay? Just get the hell out of here. There's no reason to leave the negative review. You don't have to talk to my manager, none of that type of stuff, okay? Just don't do business with me anymore. You don't like it, you leave. Very, very simple. If you keep coming back and you enjoy the content, please go ahead, subscribe. Be very, very helpful. I'm trying to get to 2,500. We're right there on 2,500 subscribers. Realistically, we want to get to 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, 2 trillion, have Colts fans on Mars by the time it is all said and done. But we take baby steps over here. It's one day at a time over here in the Right of the Bench Colts podcast, right? Either way, that's the housekeeping. It's out of the way. Let's get in to Chris Ballard and his media availability, and specifically the injury report that he spoke about heading into training camp. Because I don't know about you, but what stuck out to me when I was hearing Chris Ballard speak was that, one, Chris Lamont's corner, not that he's a superstar or anything like that, but he'll be missing some time, and that Juju Brents had a little cleanup surgery on his ankle going in to training camp. That's disgusting. I apologize for that. One take, right? That's all we got here. So you got Lamont's out for 1, 2, 3 weeks, whatever that might be, right? And Juju Brents now for a second straight year, not coming in 100%. Now, I cannot help but be a little bit aggravated by this news for really a few reasons, but one, right? You look at the blatant lack of action this offseason, right? We're relying on a group of very young corners as is. Guys that are hungry, guys that have some talent, guys that clearly they like in the organization, right? But guys that are not proven. Guys as Colts fans that we'd be setting ourselves up for disappointment to expect too much out of, right? Disappointment is rooted in expectation. So if you want to find yourself disappointed in the Indianapolis Colts secondary this year, expect them to have a very good season, right? We have to look at it for the reality that is. So in terms of the personnel itself that we have, there's already a bit left to be desired when everyone is healthy. Again, when we're talking about proven talent, they can prove me wrong. I hope they do, okay? But we're just talking about what we have in front of us, right? Along with those two perhaps getting off to a slower start, you have Dallas Flowers also coming off of that torn Achilles. And we don't know exactly how he's going to look. Might look great. Might take some time to get back into speed. Corner's a position where you got to run a lot. You got to make a lot of cuts. It's a lot of stress on that Achilles tendon. So right now, with those three guys seemingly hobbled to some degree, maybe I'm overreacting on Juju Brents if we're being honest, but the point remains, if those three guys were to be gone, you're kind of right back to where you started. And we had Darrell Baker Jr., right? So now we're back at like Darrell Baker Jr. land. I know Jalen Jones is on the roster, all this stuff. My point is that hearing about injuries and a thin secondary is aggravating as hell, right? We have not played a single snap of actual football, and we're already looking at the possibility of Darrell Baker Jr. coming out there. Now, again, to speak to this, by the way, Darrell Baker Jr., again, I might have mentioned this earlier. I don't really know. If I did, excuse me. I apologize. I'm out of my element over here. What do you want from me? Again, Darrell Baker Jr., one of the better guys in training camp last year. I haven't given up on him quite yet. But at the same time, we're already tapping into guys potentially that we don't want to see on the field. And when Chris Ballard gave that injury report, and I don't know, because I'm not actually a member of the Colts media. I'm just some kid on YouTube that just so happens to do a halfway decent job, according to a couple of you guys, which I appreciate, by the way, greatly. Keeps me going over here. But I know you must have some sort of questions that you had written down that you wanted to ask for that media availability when the time came and all that stuff. But when Chris Ballard comes out and says something like that, how anyone in that media room, I guess didn't have the wherewithal, or dare I say, did not have the balls to press him on that issue just a little bit is beyond me. I'm not saying go out there and like disrespect them or come at them or insult them or anything like that, but just something simple like, hey, Chris, you mentioned the injuries to Chris Lamont's and Juju Brents, both guys that played a role on this defense towards the back end of last year. We know the secondary struggled as is. We know you like the guys in the room as is. We understand that. We like them too. But knowing what we saw last year out of this secondary and what transpired in terms of the depth and the players that we needed to put on the field, what exactly is the reasoning behind not bringing in more competition into this secondary for training camp and preseason? Bang! Boom! Simple. Done. Are we not autonomous enough to come up with a question like that on the spot? Like, is that something that you need hours and hours to think about? I mean, I was literally sitting there asking it right off the bat. I'm sitting there watching the video on my phone, and I'm just like, he's talking, and I'm in the room like, Chris, why don't we have anyone else here? I mean, my goodness gracious. It's one of these situations where you look at the Colts secondary, and you can just see a disaster brewing in that secondary, again, from a mile away. And if a couple guys get hurt, and we're caught with our pants down once more, then what? We just say, oh, well, it's football. Injuries happen. Like, is that going to be the stance that we take? Like, sure they do, right? We know injuries happen. It's a physical game. But knowing that, how the hell can we be okay with doing absolutely nothing to add more competition to this secondary? Forget starters. I'm talking depth. I mean, good Lord, right? I'm not talking about the idea of trading for L'Jarius Sneed. I'm not talking about going and signing Justin Simmons. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. I'm just talking about depth, competition, people to raise the floor of this room a little bit more. The fact that we have not done it is insane. And speak of that idea, by the way, of this it's football. Injuries happen, right? That concept, which is true. But Chris Ballard says that all the time. I'm tired of hearing him say that, okay? You look at some of the guys that we draft in this organization. Julian Blackmon, a cornerstone player on this defense, a stud at the safety position. No question about that. Not questioning his talent, not questioning what he brings to the table. But he was injured throughout college. He's been injured much in the pros. Matt Goncalves, I like him very much. Grew up in Manorville, Long Island, literally 20 minutes from where I record for you guys on a week-to-week basis. Matt Goncalves grew up, okay? But he slipped to us this year because he missed his entire senior year with an injury, okay? Juju Brents, when we drafted him, he wasn't even cleared to play the damn game of football, okay? We continue to see him deal with injuries. Now there's a Laitu Latu. We know he has tremendous upside. His tape is spectacular. He looks as polished as you can possibly get as a rookie pass rusher, okay? But that neck injury, that scared some teams off. That's why he was there at number 15. Now, if he gets hurt, particularly in relation to that region, at what point do we say, sure, injuries happen, Chris, but we aren't helping our case by continuously investing in the guys with concerns surrounding their health? Enough is enough. That's my point. Enough is enough with that type of stuff. It's so tiring. And it just feels like for years now, the identity of this team has been the fact that we get injured. Like, that's what it feels like as a fan. Now, I can't tell if I'm just being and I'm definitely being emotional. No question about that. But I mean, we look at injuries and significant ones. Year after year after year. It feels like our identity. Lord knows our identity isn't going out there and winning some freaking playoff games. And generally, I support Chris Ballard as much, if not more, than anyone. I tend to agree with most of his philosophies surrounding the game of football. But Chris, this year is playoffs or bust. There is no other option. We have to make it. And you may just want to have a step back and a look at this roster and say, we have more than enough money to spend to bring in some training camp bodies to add some competition to this room. Again, we don't have to get superstars. I'm not talking about anything. I wasn't upset about L'Jarius Sneed. I'm not going to lose sleep if we don't sign Justin Simmons. I'm not asking for any of that stuff. It's not, again, but Lord, just some additional depth to raise the floor. Is it really that much to ask for? Let's get it fucking done, okay? Let's get it done. All right, that's Angry Justin, okay? That's me angry at Chris Ballard. I mean, it's, again, when you have someone like me getting that upset at Chris Ballard for something like that, you know something is up. I don't know how you can look at that. And was I the only one, by the way? When you heard about the injuries in the secondary, did you roll your eyes and just say, oh, Lord? And just, again, the whole injuries happen is nauseating. It's nauseating to listen to him say that. But regardless, let's get into kind of maybe the more positive stuff, or at least the less angry stuff, all right? Those burning questions heading into college training camp. That is like so corny. That's like almost, it sounds like it's like written by like ChatGPT or something like that. What's in the glass, you asked, by the way? Rum and Coke. Okay. So, question number one, headed in. And one I'm going to be looking at, and quite frankly, I'm like a broken record with this right here, okay? How involved is A.D. Mitchell going to be in this offense? Last year, again, as I think I said at the top of the show, we were able to learn a lot about Josh Downs from the way he was being used in training camp. There were plays being drawn up specifically for Josh Downs in training camp and ended up leading to him having an immediate role in this offense right out the gate, and a significant role at that, right? Curious to see if there's a vision for A.D. Mitchell in this offense early, or if they're just looking for someone to kind of just be the third guy out there. You know what I'm saying? But so far, Steichen and Jim Bob Cooter seem to be very intentional with the talent, not only that they have, right, and the way that they use them, but in the talent that they acquire. Very, very excited to see A.D. Mitchell, beyond excited, actually, to see A.D. Mitchell in practice. If we're going to be 100% honest, too, I practically came here to see him. That's a lie, but also, you know what I'm saying? Question number 2. How is the secondary going to look versus the starters, right? We have very high expectations for this offense, and for very good reason. This offense is loaded with weapons, okay? And young weapons, okay? And great offensive minds running the damn thing in Shane Steichen and Jim Bob Cooter. So as far as this secondary getting a look, and a strong look in training camp, this offense is going to make sure that they get that look, okay? Nick Cross, Rodney Thomas at free safety. Can we make any plays? Corners, can we keep up with the assortment of wideouts that we have? I'm burping up and down right now. That darn Jimmy Johns and that rum and coke bubbling to the surface, okay? Jalen Simpson, the versatile rookie starter, or rather the versatile rookie starting his career out at corner and not safety, right? Micah Abraham, another rookie corner. His tape shows, by the way, some very good instincts on the college level. His pedigree, by the way, impressive. His dad, Donnie Abraham, Pro Bowl corner. His cousin, Tim Jennings, former Super Bowl champion for the Indianapolis Colts, a Pro Bowler and an All-Pro as well, albeit not for the Colts, for the Bears, but that's neither here nor there. His brother, not a bad ball player himself, didn't make it to the NFL level, but he played football as well. Football runs in that family. Mike Abraham, I'm pretty curious to see what he could bring to the table. Again, the instincts in college, pretty good. He just, I can't tell. He kind of seems like the type of guy, and I don't want to get too high on the expectations for a 6th-round pick, but he kind of seems like the guy who just has a knack for making plays. Like, he just has a knack for making a play on the ball. You know what I'm saying? He seems like one of those players. But can either of those guys, in Jalen Simpson or Micah Abraham, make a difference in this corner room, right? Because those are guys, when we talk about, and I'm making a rant about like how this corner room isn't up to snuff, when I'm doing that rant, I'm also not accounting for the fact that maybe one of these guys steps up and plays well. That being said, they're 5th and 6th round picks, respectively. Not to say that means they couldn't make an impact, but Lord, is that what we're relying on here? You wonder why you call him Bargain Bin Ballard, right? That's why people say it, okay? Goodness gracious. Good grief. Needless to say, I'll be watching for that, right? Of course, we expect the offense to win these battles. We want the offense to win these battles, right? It would be bad if they came out and didn't perform well, but at the same time, we want to see if the secondary can come out and look like they belong on the same field as this offense, okay? Question number 3. Is Jelani Woods actually better than any of the tight ends that we have, right? I think we're all excited about what he brings to the table. I heard he dropped 2 passes on the first day of training camp. Not the end of the world, of course, but not a great start. He's the one guy that we have that gives us true upside. We have 5 guys in that room who definitely belong on an NFL roster, and all of them bring something unique to the table. You go ahead and check out, was it the last episode I made, I think? If you want a little bit more information on that. But the point is that Jelani Woods is the one guy that, as Colts fans, if you're talking about a potential superstar at the position, he's the guy that gives us hope. Curious to see if he can show some of those flashes in training camp. I suspect they're going to give him every opportunity to do so. Question number 4, linebacker. Do we have any depth behind Zaire and EJ Speed? And more importantly, really let me modify the question, do we have any depth that can cover, right? Last year when I went to training camp, Sagan Olabi I thought was a real standout player for me during that time. The dude was just flying around all over the place. Really stood out, was knocking around poor Evan Hull like he owed him money or something like that. I mean, he really gave Evan Hull a beating last year at practice, but that's neither here nor there. The only issue with a guy like Sagan Olabi, and even a Grant Stewart, who I also like as a depth piece, neither of them are a third down presence or really a meaningful one, right? And you take into account, as much as we love Zaire Franklin, as much as I think that 100 on the top 100 list is too low for a guy like Zaire Franklin, if I'm to be 100% honest with you, he's definitely, if he's lacking in one place, it's in pass coverage. EJ Speed, very solid in that role, but that's kind of where it ends, right? But ever since Darius became Shaquille, we haven't exactly had anyone that we can trust to make a real impact there on those third down set. Well, actually, Ronnie Harrison, let me give him some credit, did contribute in that role a little bit last year, but he went from linebacker to safety. I mean, we didn't know where the heck he was going to play, right? So I don't want to discount him, but my point stands. This defense and Gus Bradley's system relies on linebackers being able to cover ground in the passing game. Jalen Carles, I'm going to assume that's how you pronounce his name, rookie out of Missouri, safety converted to linebacker, a unique skill set. You hope he can find the home over there at linebacker and maybe fill that role. I heard that in OTAs. He was looking impressive. I mean, athletically, it's going to be something interesting to see when you have a safety make the transition to linebacker. Sometimes those types of things work out. Sometimes they don't. You look at a guy like Mark Barron, who I believe was a first-round pick out of Alabama and was a spectacular player in college. He was unable to really find a home in the NFL because you have guys come in that are kind of versatile, right? And they're kind of like a hybrid player. Think of an Isaiah Simmons as well, right? And it implies something positive, the fact that you come out there and be a versatile football player. But at the NFL level, it almost feels like if you don't have a home at one position, you don't have a home at any position, right? It could be a negative if a guy is a jack of all and a master of none. Hopefully, Jalen Carles finds a home at linebacker, because to move him to linebacker means that on tape, you have to assume they didn't think he had the stuff to be an NFL safety. They thought maybe he could fit in as a pass coverage type of linebacker. Curious to see what he can do there. Maybe he makes some plays. Question number 5, and really an important one to put all the way at the back end of the video. These were in no particular order. What is that new kickoff going to be looking like in practice? Will they be practicing it this early on? I think they should be. Who is going to be playing special teams? Does the new kickoff rule, when you hear Chris Ballard talk about this right now, he is kind of wishy-washy in terms of, and I agree with him, it is so hard to predict exactly what it's going to look like and who you're supposed to have on the field. Do you want to go for speed? Do you want to go for power? Do you want to go for a combination of both? I mean, what guys do you want out there? Curious to see who the Colts have out there playing special teams. And is that going to affect the roster in a way where there might be cuts that we would not expect because they need certain bodies out there playing special teams? Just something to consider. Maybe that's a reason we would keep 5 tight ends. Maybe that athletic skill set that a tight end would have is something that fits well into the new kickoff. I don't really know, but it's just something to consider. And in a football sense, forget just the Colts. Just as a football fan, it's something I'm very, very curious to learn a little bit more about. I'm not all that excited about it. It is kind of, I don't like any of the type of stuff. I don't like the idea of them going to 17 games. I didn't like the idea of them going to 17 games. I don't like the idea of them going to 18 games. I don't like the idea that you get to rewrite history like that. All these records get broken. Now, I know some of you guys are so old that you were around when they were playing 12 games, but it had been a meaningful period of time where it was a 16-game season, right? My point is that I'm kind of not really all that with the changes that happen in this league, and it seems these days they're happening very quickly and very often and almost without much regard for kind of the repercussions of them. So I'm curious to see what the kickoff thing is. I have a feeling that the change of the kickoff doesn't end here. I mean, they've been trying to do something with the kickoff. Curious to see, kind of how this thing plays out, not just in training camp, but again, as the season goes on, how's it going to be officiated? Do the rules change again next year? I don't know. But it's a big question I have going into training camp. How are the Colts going to approach it? Neither here nor there. That's the entire episode. That was it. This right here was the Riding the Bench Colts podcast. I have an itch on my nose, so I'm trying to rush out of here. My goodness. Nose hair or something like that. Like, subscribe, all that type of stuff. And as always, go Colts.